It's like that country song says, "I can fix a drink." Oh, I can fix
I can
a.
fix a drink.
Hey, how did you know about that song?
Okay, I'm from Texas. Of course, I know what that song is.
Does all your exes live in Texas? Just asking.
Pretty much, yeah. I could say all my exes live in Texas.
Okay, I'm trying to find out where my where the heck. Let me see. Put you in here. Okay, you're good. You're good in a central figure. Good there. Got you. Well, this probably work here. I'm not sure why I'm not getting. Oh, here we go. I know how to adjust you. Hang on. We're gonna get you. We're gonna get you all adjusted.
Okay.
And that's called edit transform. And then we're going to lower this here. And we're going to raise that there. Let's see how that goes. That's probably the wrong direction there. Okay. Hang on.
It's
Let me
kind
lower
of,
this. Here we go. Wait a
just
minute.
feel
I got here. Oh, yeah, here we go. Slowly coming through. Let me put that in there. Alrighty.
feels a little bit like going to the chiropractor, getting adjusted.
Yeah. Hey, there's no charge on this one here. All right, hang on. We're almost done here. We'll do that there. We'll unlock you here. We'll spread you out there. Sounds kind of crazy, but okay. And then we're going to lower you there. Oh man, you're getting bigger and bigger. You like that crazy 1950s movie where the woman got bigger and bigger. Well, Doctor Burton, man, I was telling the people before the show that we got monsters again. Now we talked about monsters before, and I know you got some other things we're going to talk about.
Hmm.
But it seems that the governments of the world, the moratorium on combining DNA from different species is changing. It seems like they're breaking down that wall of restriction. Are you seeing that out there?
Yeah, I think I and even when the moratorium might have been the official narrative, who's to say, I doubt very seriously that it was actually being honored, throughout all the bureaucracies that operate in our government. Um, you know, I was telling somebody just the other day, right here in Merkel, Texas, we've got a legend about the goat man,
Whoa.
which is pretty much like it sounds. It's a satyr sort of creature. And when I went to college, I heard from people all over the state talking about this thing, and I dug a little bit deeper, and some of the earliest sightings were in the late 50s, early 1960s, with the Lake Worth, what they called the Lake Worth monster, close to Fort Worth, Texas. And of course, I grew up hearing these stories about Goatman south of town here. So, yeah, if those anecdotal pieces of evidence or any indication, it seems like this has been going on for quite some time. Um, People looking at these things through the biblical lens sort of see it as Jesus's admonition about the coming of the Son of Man being as the days of Noah, and if these sort of chimera cropping up, which they seem to be, cryptid sightings, I think there's a case to be made now that there are more cryptid sightings that are taking place than in years past. Um, so if that's any indication, then I mean we may be headed there. Yeah, I mean the big piece of news on this front lately, at least in political circles, was which is sort of the subtext of what you mentioned a moment ago, was this bill that was shot down that would have banned human animal chimera creation. But yeah, so that's where we are right now. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we're
There's no
we're make
restriction. Let me ask you
we're
something. In the book of I think it's in the um, oh crap! Now I just lost my Bible book there. Enoch.
mhm.
Didn't it talk about the angels teaching humans different things?
Yeah, a wide variety of things. It's a mixture of practical sciences and occult knowledge.
Hmm.
Everywhere from what was it? Root cutting is mentioned as one of the sort of medicinal sciences
Hmm.
that's taught. But the Watchers also teach them not just the movement of the stars and the planets and celestial bodies, but how to read them properly.
Hmm.
Um,
Now,
and
were these necessarily bad things? Because doesn't it sort of
no, that's what I'm saying. There was a combination, uh, when looking at anything that the wider demonic realm does, it basically, you know, perverts or flips something that God presents on its head. So whereas the biblical message about the movement of stars and celestial bodies is that it's kind of like a cosmic clock, and it reveals the glory and plans of the Lord. Well, the underbelly of that would be astrology, trying to divine individual destinies from the movements of these stars. Um, Now, and it does seem, and I make a case for this in Interview with the Giant in one of the chapters on the primal witch, that the first people that came under the tutelage of the Watchers were the first witches,
whoa.
um, because it in combination with what a number of other Watchers are teaching, in particular Azazel, because we learn that he reveals the secrets of the heavenly realms, the mysteries of the heavens, I think is how it says.
Hmm.
And there's a clear implication here about um, using this knowledge for selfish or nefarious ends. And that's why I say that it's not all of it was bad, um, but there were certain fields of knowledge that were aberrant and could be
Hmm.
considered occult
Hmm.
or magical.
Right. Let me ask you something. Now, I think we talked about this before, but did they give them instructions to create chimeras?
Well, again, there are 2 points that I would make here. One is the word um, Nephilim, which typically we translate as giant, and that seems to be in terms of the linguistics of related languages, Semitic languages like Aramaic, that seems to be the indication. But there's a broad, sort of trailer of definitions for Nephilim, and all kinds like aberration and anathema and cursed and abortion. All of these things are sort of teased out linguistically from the word
Hmm.
itself,
Hmm.
and that leaves the door open for when Enoch says that the Watchers also sinned against the animals, the birds and reptiles and things that walked on four legs, which,
They were doing the reptiles too.
well, yeah, it seems to indicate that they were making human animal chimera in this larger, genetic experiment, essentially.
Hmm. I won't mention the name of the actual COVID, but Cooties 19. I don't know if that'll do. There's a lot of talk that there's materials in there. And some of the talk, of course, they're always somebody's going to be saying there's aborted baby parts in there.
Hmm.
Are you familiar with that being in there? I know there's these other kind of nanobots and all kind of other
Yeah,
crap flying
I've
around.
heard I've heard all of that. I think the most disturbing thing about um, let's just call it what it is. It's not really a VAX. It's really it's really experimental gene therapy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the
Well,
thing that yeah, again, we're talking about genetics and altering genetics here because the mechanism for this serum is uh, messenger RNA,
right.
mRNA,
Mm-hmm.
and you're probably familiar with the way that works. You don't have to be a biochemist to understand it. Um, you know, messenger RNA is it's like the contractor and the contracting team that's going to build something. They're going to build something, and that your DNA is like the architect slash, um, you know, blueprints.
Mm-hmm.
And so the messenger RNA that you're created with builds you basically out of the DNA, taking the coding from the DNA. So if you're going to introduce foreign mRNA into your system, you as a recipient can't really predict what that's going to do to you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the people that designed it may know, but how in the world could you? I mean, how in the world could you predict? And we're finding out now that, um, now is just the initial stuff. The myocarditis and the Bell's palsy and the,
Mm-hmm.
um, blood clots and everything else, that people are having. That's just the initial stuff. What else is down the pike here?
Well, I can guarantee or guarantee that they're keeping records of everything that's happening to everyone. So there's
Yeah.
going to be some kind of fine tuning in there, and it's not going to be fine tuning to help us. It's going to be fine tuning for targeting people. In
Hmm.
fact, during my Randy Points, Judd, I put up a graphic that was grabbed from the Jerusalem Post where it says Pfizer's CEO was not allowed into Jerusalem because he's not vaccinated. Now wait a minute. The boy he ought to be first in line. Everyone
Should
at
have been
Pfizer and Johnson and Johnson, they should be on shot number 5 by now.
Yeah, exactly. I was talking to a buddy of mine the other night who was a helicopter pilot in the Army, and he uh, he didn't do test flights himself, but he had friends who were test pilots, and they would never get into these new helicopters unless the mechanic was willing to get in with them. So that's sort of analogous to the
Yeah, I like
CEO
that.
of Pfizer.
Mm-hmm.
He's not willing to take that. That ought to tell you something right there. And as a footnote to that, speaking of Israel, seems like I read something yesterday about the something like 95% of the new infections
Mm-hmm.
of this were people who were previously vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Right. I've been seeing studies like that too. More and more. There's a whole list of doctors. Now, I know, remember back in the days of something called "Dead Doctors Don't Lie." Well, I got a feeling
yeah,
a whole lot more doctors are dying. I sure know that four. Not this is not related to what we're currently talking about, but 4 police officers that were at January 6th have committed suicide. One of them took his classic Mustang and rolled it over. And nobody tears up. If you're going to commit suicide and you're that distraught, you're not going to mess with your classic Mustang. Everybody knows that. No
right,
class, it's like if you're a
right.
Harley driver, you're not going to destroy it when you destroy yourself. And then the 3 others, they said nobody, we can't reveal, we can't tell you, we haven't discovered how they killed themselves. We just know they did. This is what the authorities are saying. So a lot of people seem to be dying. Speaking of course, I think what happened was they weren't psychologically ready for the guy in the Viking hat. Okay, that was sitting behind Pelosi's desk. I guess they weren't mentally prepared, and so they just killed themselves. I don't know. I mean, this makes about
Yeah.
as much sense as what we're talking about as to the rollout of this thing, this VACCXING. How's that one? But
That'll
how's that
work.
for YouTube algorithm? You won't catch that
That
on YouTube. You know you
that'll
won't
work.
because I can mess with these boys over there, okay? Because they all kind of stupid, Judd. But so now we've got backlogs in airports because they can't find pilots. Now,
Hmm.
according to some, the pilots dropping like flies in England, and they're refusing to take the VA something with an
Hmm.
X in it.
Right.
So I'm just saying,
Well, I mean,
a lot of people are dying. Okay, let me scratch all that. Okay, I got my high horse, but let me ask you this, Judge. I'm going to focus a little bit. Um, Once somebody changes the mRNA, the vaccine changes the gene therapy that is given, does
mhm.
that person then are they still human, or are they a monster? And that's the tie into tonight's show.
Well, I mean
Are they a chimera? Are humans being turned into chimeras?
that's one of my fears. One of my concerns. Again, it's how can we without all of the without all. I mean, there's no clinical data because there was no the only test that they did was randomized, and so there's
Mm-hmm.
no cohesive research narrative to look at, um, to even begin to know. or predict how this stuff is going to turn out. At least not from the wider scientific community. The guy that invented the mechanism, the mRNA mechanism for this kind of gene therapy, said, "Look, hey, the guy's saying don't take it. He's got reservations about taking the serum." Um, so it's you see what I'm saying? It's difficult to say what it's going to do if it does chimericize somebody. um that's an interesting question. Do they remain human?
Mm-hmm.
um
Well, you know what? Now for the evolutionists that are watching the program, millions of years of evolution has got us to where we are. Just saying, okay. And if you watch the movie War of the Worlds with Tom Cruise, it says kind of, I don't know if it says at the end or the beginning. I think it's at the end. It says that humans have gone through eons of time of viruses and flus and diseases and have earned the right to be here. But what it's saying is we millions of people have died with the plague and all, every kind of disease there is out there. And so the human's been built up to where he is now. But now what's happening is somebody's changing the evolutionary pattern, trying to short circuit it and dumping an evolutionary change instantaneously. That can't be good. Do you understand, Spock?
yeah, I agree. Good. That's a good Shatner impression, by the way.
All right. A little Trekkish there. I'm just saying, man, we have earned the right to be here. Somebody's trying to shortchange it. And like you just said, there's a spec sheet on there that is just nothing but a blank page.
Yeah.
And everybody's saying, trust us. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait a minute.
As they hand us the documents with redacted,
Yeah.
blurred out, whatever. I, and I'm not a hard sciences, biology kind of guy. I'm working off of, but I did have some pretty significant components of genetics in my physical anthropology classes in grad school. So this stuff isn't completely foreign to me. And when I first started hearing about them using mRNA as a delivery system for this, that bothered me a little bit because, did you engineer it? Obviously they did. What's that going to do with my DNA? What's it going to take for my DNA and start building if I put that in my body?
By the way, I got kind of an announcement. Now, this might be a breaker for some folks out there watching the program. I'm sure people are now aware that there are countless videos of people taking metal and putting metal where they got the shot and the metal sticking some sort of magnetism.
Yeah.
Okay? Now I would say some of it's a hoax. You got to be reasonable. You can't leave your brain at the door and say everything's a conspiracy. But there's some pretty honest looking people that's done that. Okay, so I've seen the metal videos. I've seen some videos with people taking a wall stud detector that detects metals and going off. I've seen spoons. I've seen quarters, which I don't even believe are metallic. So that tells me it's some kind of alien metallic attraction, magnetized attraction. But then there's a recent one that's coming out now, is that people that have got the infection by injection, they're setting off store alarms when they're passing through. I've seen the videos where a guy walks through, sets off the store alarm like you're stealing something, and then prove it. He goes back and just sticks his arm out there and it sets it off. And I've happened to notice, this is just quite coincidental, this is anecdotal, but I've been hearing a lot more alarms been going off at some stores, and I casually thought, man, there are a lot of thieves going on. Is this San Francisco? Where you can walk out of the store with $950 worth of stuff, but now they're setting off theft alarms. Something didn't pass a smell test here.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and if that's the case, I mean, if this is how they're going to roll out Chimera, and I'm of the mind that that sort of thing is going to come back under the auspices of what Jesus was talking about in Matthew when he talks about the days of Noah. I mean, it's hard enough to wrap your head around how this narrative is being fed to us to begin with, because all we hear about now is is that this is they've already divided us along another line, that this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Well, that's not what the data says in other countries around the world, like Australia, Israel. The stats are changing, and plus
Hmm.
this Delta variant, um, has like a 2 or 3 week spike, and then it drops again. That we've seen that happening in Western Europe, particularly in Britain. Um, so, I've also heard some pundits talk about, that perhaps it's the vaccine, it's the serum. Excuse me,
Hmm.
I have to fool the algorithm. The serum itself that's actually creating the new variants. Which shouldn't come as I mean, viruses do that anyway, because that's what viruses do. They mutate. They make copies of themselves, and they change and they adapt. And I mean, but we always have had viruses. We always will. As long as humans and animals are on. Um, there's the Delta virus right there.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's called the Delta variant airlines. But yeah,
Yeah,
now they're talking. I mean, here's a super spreader event right here in action.
exactly.
Somehow,
Yeah,
somehow, all these infected by injected people are spreading the virus like there's no tomorrow. Man, it's kind of crazy when they
yeah,
guarantee you that you're all kind of safe if you take the jab, but
yeah,
obviously
exactly.
not.
Well, and that's, for the state of Texas, that's a double shame too, because they left the special session where there were some pretty important things on the agenda.
Hmm.
Um, but let's go to Washington D.C. and virtue signal, and pretend like there's not a problem on the border. Pretend like, if it's such a crisis, a health crisis, then why are we letting people come across the southern border in record numbers, untested, unvaccinated, just released into the
Hmm. Right.
released into the general population?
The contradictions are everywhere. But I got a feeling though people are really they're getting experimented on. And I would think that now we're talking about whether or not if you have taken it and say you're at the third dose now, uh,
Hmm.
if your DNA has been structurally altered to something other than human, that you become a
Hmm.
chimera, then that I would say that makes you a monster variant. I call it the monster variant.
The
Uh,
monster variant,
yeah,
yeah.
I call
I mean, technically it does. I mean, you retain. If we're to look at world mythology as a guide, a lot of these creatures retain some measure of their humanity. I'll take the Minotaur, for instance, from Minoan Greek mythology, who lived in the labyrinth underneath of King Minos's. Uh, is that Guinness for me? Because I'll take it.
I was just thinking. My bad. I was just thinking.
We might need a couple of those. Um, no, but the tale of the Minotaur. Um, is that he was, on the surface, he was this savage beast that devoured the human sacrifices that they sent down. The Athenians would send a tribute to the Minoans, and but there was a kind of implicit loneliness to the Minotaur's existence. So there was something, he was still somewhat anthropomorphic, human-like in form. So he retained some measure of his humanity, but still also had the theriomorphic, the animal-like
Hmm.
quality to him.
Hmm.
So your question about, is it a monster? I would say, yeah. In the classic sense, it would be a monster. Does it retain some of its humanity? I think that's a valid, deep existential question. It's
Hmm.
one that prods at the philosophy at the core of all of this. Is, do they retain their human? I would say that they retain enough of their humanity. They would retain enough of their humanity to immediately regret their decision once these changes started to happen.
Hmm. Well, that would be a good indicator. And I'm not, and I'm sure you're not judging anyone who's got. I know people who's got the infection by injection. I mean,
Yeah, I'm not. I
so
I
listen,
don't.
we can make that clear about that.
Sure.
And in fact, it's kind of a kind of a sad thing for that. And because if you're getting that message 24 hours a day, and you're getting
Mm,
threatened every which way, threatening now. The new thing is that they're going to threaten all Medicare facilities, that everyone in there better get vaccinated, or now they're starting with employees, but you
mm-hmm.
can guarantee that threat for Medicare payments to the people in those Medicare facilities are going to say, to remain here, you're going to have to get the jab. And then it's going to roll
Yeah.
out even further to those people who aren't in the facility, who's collecting Medicare or something out in the field. Then they're going to say, you can't get it. So, it's so how you can't judge them. You know that's coming, and they're being pressured. However,
Yeah.
now, as far as the evidence of turning into chimera, that would be somebody, for instance, there were some interviews in California where they're saying some jokester went around with a pole, a clipboard, and said, "Hey, we're thinking about locking everyone who hasn't got the vaccine. We want to lock them up and seize all their assets." And everybody's saying, oh yeah, got to.
Yeah.
Those are chimera, or people that don't believe, or they believe that you can have a vaccine without a spec sheet, without a qualifier telling you what's in it and what.
Yeah.
Remember, you can't take an aspirin without saying, if you take this, you're going to get this, and this. These
Right.
possibilities.
Right.
Somehow, this thing gets a complete pass, and you're supposed to just trust people. But to
Mm-hmm.
me, if you've accepted that as some kind as reliable, then
Yeah.
you may be a chimera.
Yeah. You've already started the change. Yeah. I mean, it's yeah, and
And if
I'm the
they
same
hate,
way.
and particularly if they hate people who haven't got the jab. Now we're saying we love people
Yeah.
who we love people who got it, but the people
Yeah.
who got it, if they haven't regretted it, then they're hating the people that don't got it. And man, I've got some
Mm,
sneers looking by. I mean, there's people driving on motorcycles still with masks. I've seen them going out in the open with masks, and I know those people hate me. They see me without a
mm,
mask. I know you can see it in their eyes. Like I showed a
yeah.
graphic of this. I don't know if you saw Randy Points, but Biden man in his little molesting little girl type thing that he does. He was signing something. He grabbed this little girl, and this little girl, you zoom in, you can see the fear in her eyes. And
Oh yeah.
that's kind of what I think. Hey, we got a number of questions, Jez.
Yeah.
So let's get those.
Sure.
Let's get those to you. All right, going back up the list. All right, our Australian biz says, Dr. Judd, the Watchers abandoned their responsibilities and fornicated with
Mm-hmm.
Earth women. These women birthed the Nephilim. Was Aziel the corrupter of men? Azazel.
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 Certainly, he was one of the corruptors of men. There's a case that there are different. There are different species of corruption that each of the Watchers were responsible for. It is interesting that he brings up Azazel out of. I mean, there's a host of them. Simyadza, Kokabel, Barakiel. It's interesting that he brings up Azazel because when God hands down the judgment, tells it to Enoch, and Enoch is to pass it along, kind of like he's, if God is the larger legal system, then Enoch was the judge sitting, in court, and it was his job to tell, the Watchers the what for, essentially. Now put that on a T-shirt. Give the Watchers the what for. That was Enoch, and he says very clearly. I think it's about. I want to say it's First Enoch 15, somewhere around there, where this court docket is being read, this judgment is being read,
Mhm.
and to Azazel is ascribed all sin. He was considered the most culpable out of all of them, even more so than the leader Simyadza. And for that, he was bound up and thrown into a pit in a place called Dudal that those of us who are interested in that thing are still looking for. And this sort of this treatment is remembered in the atonement sacrifice that's outlined in Leviticus, because there's one God that's sacrificed to God, to Yahweh. And then the other goat is not a sacrifice. It's called the Azazel goat, but it's not a sacrifice. It's a remembrance of all of the sin, because that's the phraseology that's used. To Azazel is ascribed all sin. It's a remembrance of that pre-flood event, that corruptive event that our guest is referring to.
Hmm. Interesting. That's an interesting answer there. That's really great. All right. Truth and Treasure says, are Satan and the Nephilim directing the current takeover of human lives and freedoms through the COVID-19 situation?
Well, yeah, the general answer would be yes. I mean, because the Nephilim are still around in the form of demons. That was part of that judgment that I was referring to a moment ago.
Mhm.
Enoch spends a whole, page and a half, um, really just breaking down the Nephilim and telling them, look, you're going to be disembodied spirits, unclean spirits, roaming the earth, hungry and thirsty but never sated, always hampering mankind. So yeah, they're sort of the middling and lower ranks of the demonic realm. While you have Satan, and there are still principalities that are aligned with Satan. The so-called archons that Paul talks about. He gives a laundry list of um, these angelic beings that were put in charge of different geographical locations in Earth. And so, yeah, absolutely, they're orchestrating all this, and more of this is coming to light because we're finding out just how many of these crazies are
Mhm.
politicians and big bankers and movie makers, just what sort of perverts and Luciferian satanic pedophiles they are.
Well, speaking of pervert, satanic pedophiles, I understand that Obama is having a big soiree out on Martha's Vineyard, and I advise the former president Obama to not move out there because that Martha Vineyard's almost sea level, and according to
Hmm.
that Frankenstein-looking John Kerry, we got 5 years before the oceans rise 10 feet, and it's going to
That,
swamp that. So but
that's right.
he's having a big soiree right now. And by the way, speaking of that John Kerry Frankenstein-looking freak, every time you see him, man, he's got a black eye. What kind of
Hmm.
Illuminati BS is going on there? He's trying to get his cut. They said, "Well, we're going to have to punch you in the eye, bro." All right, so here's another question for you. Why was the Belial the worst fallen angel? Somebody knows there are angels out there.
hmm Well, Belial is one of the epithets um, of Satan. So that, I mean, that right there, just if you look at it as an epithet for Satan, that right there tells you all you need to know. He was the worst, even above Azazel, because he led the coup in heaven. He led the rebellion against God.
It is that you mentioned the Matthew where it says, "So in the days of Noah, so shall it be when the Son of Man comes." And
Hmm.
there were giants in the land there, definitely chimeras of all kinds. And it seems that the Nephilim had been in league with humans, giving them information to create these things, or maybe perhaps they had been creating themselves. And it seemed like if you, I'm not a biblical scholar, but it seems to me they were trying to alter the human DNA structure so that when you get to the days of Noah, all flesh would have been corrupted. And it seems
Hmm.
they had corrupted everyone, or you could say everyone got the Nephilim vaccination
Yeah,
pre-flood. So
yeah,
everyone was getting the Nephilim vaccination, but Noah refused to take it, and he was an outlier.
right.
And
A
fortunately,
conspiracy theorist.
and right, he was a conspiracy theorist, and obviously needed to be dealt with. And he was contaminating others by not being infected. And I don't know how that
Yeah,
is. I don't know how an uninfected person can infect somebody who's got a vaccination against the infection. It's a weird, wacky world. But they all had the Nephilim vaccine, except for Noah and eight. And of course, the line of Jesus came through there. Now here they are again. The and we I'm almost going to call it you can call it the New World Order injection, the Democrat injection, whatever you want to call it, satanic injection. But they're doing it again. Is
yeah.
there a prevent going on here on the scale of trying to prevent Jesus' lineage or Jesus himself being born through a holy lineage?
Mhm. Well, I mean, that was the object, in the antediluvian and ancient world, was to kill off the bloodline of the Messiah. And it was sort of the last ditch attempt to do that um, before Jesus really came on the scene. Uh, a case could be made for the battle between David and Goliath. Goliath was one of these giants. Um, Pitted himself as a champion of the Philistines against this what he thought was this little pipsqueak kid, and David was so confident that he not only gathered one stone, but he gathered five stones
Yeah.
in total to go kill Goliath's brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in my mind a stark attempt to squelch the line of the Messiah, because it comes down directly from David at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, now, the other thing is that, you have to remember that the devil hates us. Every apostate angel, every demon, they hate us. They want to use us, deceive us, and kill us,
Mm-hmm.
and just literally destroy us, because we're made in the image of the Creator,
Mm-hmm.
and we have that link to them, to God, that those creatures, even though they're created beings, angels, the entire hierarchy,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have that kind of connection to God that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really one of the main reasons that they hate us so much and want to destroy us. And it doesn't take a master of logic to discern, when you hear about people depopulating the earth to save it, under the auspices of ecology and environmentalism. Wait a minute, that sounds a lot like our enemy, and the agenda that he has, that's far older, to kill us. It doesn't matter what it looks like on the surface, just as long as it gets the job done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's certainly been clandestine, but this cabal, call them whatever you want to, the New World Order, deep state, whatever, they have chapters of these people all over the world, globalist, whatever you want to call them. They're all part of the same organization ultimately, and they're carrying out the corrupting agenda in much the same way that you see in the pre-flood world and in the ancient world. Because so a lot of what we've been talking about tonight has to do with the biological, right? The actual corrupting of our biology, our existence. But it was a thorough corrupting of everything. This world, its nature, the very air that we breathe. I published a paper here earlier this year and we talked about it, about the cultural engineering and the cultural corrupting that the Watchers and the Giants were responsible for, the manipulation of our very language, which spreads out into culture. By virtue of it being anchored, in the intellectual traditions of societies. And so it's not just the corruption of biology and the attempt to thwart the ultimate plan of God. It's a complete corruptive agenda.
Now, for those of you out there saying, "Hey, the bio says we're going to talk about monsters," well, we are talking about monsters, and I think what we're talking about is a more fearsome monsters than the one that may be under your bed. By the way, there is a poll up on the website that it says, "What is your scariest monster?" And so, hang on for a second, Judd. I'm going to check
Sure.
and see how the poll's doing here. We have a choice between vampires, werewolves, zombies, clowns, Democrats. How'd that get in there? But hang on. Let's go check here. I should have had this on a laptop. I'm overlaying. I'm looking at you. I'm overlaying you with a. Oh, here we go. All right. So right now the result. Whoa! The scariest monster: 75% Democrat, 12% zombies. Thing under the bed. There's something under bed. I think I tried to get you to go with that last time. I couldn't get you to go down with. I couldn't get you to go with that. But there's something under the bed, Judd.
Monster under the bed. Yeah.
There is.
And it might be a Democrat. Is what the poll seems to indicate.
Well, why wouldn't they be? Because they're going to be knocking on doors, and that's a Democrat at your door. But we we've almost created a checklist to find whether or not. And maybe I need to put this on the website, some kind of checklist. Do you have these symptoms? One would be unreasonable hate for those who haven't been vaccinated. Do you trust the government, no matter what they say? Do you believe abortion is a lot of fun and everybody should do it? I mean, there's a whole checklist that will tell you if you have been transformed into a human, from a human into a monster. But let's say, wait a minute, what do you mean monster? Well, let me ask you this. the latest picture, which I showed in Rainy Points, of our so-called president using the little girl as a prop, whispering in her ear while signing a bill. And I don't know if you saw that. I zoomed in on the eyes. She had this fear. I mentioned this before, but what do you call somebody who touches little girls? You call them a monster.
Yeah.
What do you call somebody who wants to kill babies? You call them a monster. What do you do with somebody who's just got unreasonable, unbridled hate in their soul? You call them a monster, because those monsters are the ones that will throw somebody else in jail. As I mentioned, California says they just soon put everybody in jail, probably use the guillotine on them if they're not going to obey the government. You know, they look at them as everybody's a terrorist now if you don't agree with the system.
Yeah.
And so those are some monster checks right there. And so somebody needs...
Well, it's interesting, and I won't dwell on this too long, but it's interesting you put it, in that context, because a lot of the behavior, this sort of hate-ridden behavior, is often politically stanced, and it's very reminiscent of the Jacobins, who fomented the French Revolution, and consequently, the Jacobins were they were Illuminati. They were Bavarian Illuminati, and no less a person than George Washington warned us about them in a letter he wrote in 1798. He sort of warned us about them in his farewell address once he stepped down from the presidency. There's a letter he wrote about this pastor had warned him about the presence of the Illuminati and the Jacobins. And Washington says, I know very well that the Illuminati and the Jacobins are here because they were trying to recruit during the French Revolution. I think Washington might have been inclined to help them had they not been associated with the Jacobins, which he knew full well were Illuminized.
Wow. Man, that's an interesting little tidbit right there. Somebody here said, Roots Calhoun says, Daniel Ott, I got to know if that's a El Presidente Stetson. Mine costs $900, or is that a Shasta? Oh, he's doing me. Give me a test. I'll just tell you it's a 3.5 beaver, and I didn't pay $900 for him. But if you want to buy me a $900 hat, just go ahead and send it to my address. Send me a private message, and I'll give you an address. Send me one. All right, let's get another one. This is from Max. It says, now I guess I may have triggered political talk here. I didn't mean to, but is Obama the lawless one, foretold to come? Well, it seems to me the one foretold to come won't have a desire for women, and Michael Obama doesn't qualify. So, could it be?
He could be. I mean, he's still so.
Look at that scrawny dude.
Well, I mean, he's so that's what I was getting at, is that he's still so active behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. I mean, his lust for power. He never lost the lust for power. Mm-hmm. He and Michelle.
Michael.
Michelle.
Okay. Oh, you got the quotes. Okay, that's good.
I got the quotes.
Okay.
I got the quotes. Are still very politically active on the DC scene. They've never lost their political ambitions, even being out of the White House.
Yeah, I think he might be pulling that Skeletor Biden strings there too. Wow, man. Azura says, Judd, when God banished Cain for killing Abel, who were the others he banished him to?
Well, that's an excellent question. This may speak to other races of humans that existed. At no point we tend to think of Adam and Eve as the first man and woman, but at no point in Genesis does the narrative say that Adam and Eve were the first humans. They were just the first humans in the line of the Messiah. They were especially created for that. And of course, we all share a genetic connection back to that, whatever that time frame may be. But it seems to me that, if you interpret the human fossil, the anthropoid fossil record in a biblical manner, and not through the evolutionary lens. In other words, you look at them as at the variations as different adaptations, and perhaps even subspecies like breeds of animals. We're all talking about humans. They were just different subspecies of humans. And so I tend to think that some of the other people that he would have he was banished to were these other races of humans. They were sentient human beings.
Okay. Wonderfully created out of a live chat, says Judd. Are we going to see fairies, trolls, mermaids with this Lion's Gate portal? I'm hearing a lot about this, and would you consider them demonic Nephilim beings?
I'd say yeah. I would say yes to both. You know, the this idea of a portal or an opening into the netherworld or some other realm or dimension has been on my mind a lot with this book on Göbekli Tepe that I've been writing with Dr. Aaron Judkins,
Wow.
because even the archaeologists that have worked on the site have concluded that the people that built this place believed that it was a portal to the netherworld, and that is a recurrent theme in many religious sites around the world, but especially the clusters of those that existed in the later antique Mesopotamian world, because this idea of a portal or opening into the netherworld from which these other beings could come and traffic remained. It was perpetuated, and so I think, looking at it that way, I think the answer has to be yes. Is that you're going to see. Um, all kind. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I mean, cryptid sightings are on the rise, and there are creatures like Dogman and Skinwalkers and Bigfoot that people, cryptozoologists have now posited that they may not just be um, purely materialistic or natural, but they may be supernatural because they traffic between dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of anecdotes about Bigfoot, showing up out of nowhere or
Mm-hmm.
disappearing into nowhere.
So, why did you think they buried Göbekli Tepe?
Well, I think initially I thought that it might be flood deposition, but there's no uniform stratification in the matrix of in other words, the material, the debitage and um, soil and that they use to backfill the site. I'm starting to believe that they the people, the humans that built it under the direction of the Watchers, were starting to see the corruption around them. Perhaps had been corrupted to a degree themselves, and in a moment of clarity, I think they realized a little. It was too little, too late. But they realized that if they didn't do something, that for however long they had left on the earth, it wasn't going to be pleasant. And so I tend to think that that's the main reason that it was
Mm-hmm.
buried. But obviously, the information that the Watchers passed on to people at places like Mount Hermon, like Göbekli Tepe, survive because it gets a reboot in the post-flood world, with Canaan, Arphaxad's son, who literally rediscovers an inscription that the Watchers had left that contained all their teachings.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's certainly one medium by which this idea was restarted in the post-flood world. But I think, it was that moment of clarity that the builders of Göbekli Tepe had. Say, at least some of them said, this butchery of our fellow man and perversion of the natural order. Look at what it's done to our society. Look at what it's doing to our world. We're surrounded by these terrifying, talk about megafauna, the giants and these huge chimerical creatures. Literally, I think they had the hell scared out of them, and it was just a little too late. But they decided to backfill the site.
Hmm. Uh, so I would call that a thin place.
Hmm.
And my question to you is, I'm quite sure those thin places still exist, whether or not they're at the
Yeah,
original location or not.
yeah,
Is it
yeah.
is it possible that if someone were to find one of these thin places, maybe what some may call it a portal,
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing. You know, you got your Skinwalker Ranch, which is a cornucopia of creeps coming through.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible that we would see an entity, one of these monstrous chimeras, come through from another dimension if we knew the location and waited it out?
Um, it's possible. I mean, this is certain. Ostensibly, you would think yes. I mean, that if you just, if you waited around long enough, you knew the exact coordinates of one of these places.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, arguably, we do know exact coordinates. Uh, I tend to think that the the cave, the what was called the gates of hell, first by the Phoenicians, and then Jesus repeats that on his trip to Caesarea Philippi,
Mm-hmm.
a place which I know well because I wrote my dissertation on it.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to think that that's one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that the Devil's Cave in Southern California that Jack Parsons was so associated with, I think is probably another one. And I hear about from a lot of landowners, that have lots of cryptid sightings on their land.
Mm-hmm.
They're all convinced that there are portals on their land, and so I think
Well,
that there are these probably natural they're demonically occurring, and so if you want to call that naturally occurring, and then there are artificial ones, that we're making with you know particle accelerators and
so
CERN and things like that.
didn't mean to distract you there. Well,
No, no, no.
let me ask something though. Uh, is it possible that the Watchers had given the technology to create portals or thin places pre-flood? And because
Hmm.
now many people been on this program said that a lot of these creatures went inner Earth, and that's where they
Hmm.
reside now. But what if they had the technology to create portals, and they left this dimension, and they're simply coming back? And these things you mentioned, Dogman and several other things,
Hmm.
Bigfoot, they're simply coming back the other way through the portal now that the flood's over.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's entirely plausible. Um, you know, um, a lot of ancient monuments, particularly the megalithic ones, are built along these what researchers have called for years ley lines.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in many cases, they coincide with places that are known for, um, you know, recurring sightings of these kinds of entities and creatures. So it seems to me that yes, there was some sort, and it's a supernatural technology.
Yeah.
There's not much difference between magic and science in this realm that we're talking about here, and so I tend to think that yeah, there was something from the pre-flood world, and we get glimmers of it, the remnants of it today. But it seems like there's been this almost Raiders of the Lost Ark push to try and find occult related relics, artifacts,
Mm-hmm.
sacred geography, ley lines, these ancient portals that and if we're to believe even some of the accounts coming out of fields like ufology, then clearly artificially some of these portals have been manufactured in some manner.
Mm. All right. Now let's get to another question. This is from Richard Brower. It says, Jed, do you think the power pulling the strings on our political leaders are taking orders from the devil or demon inhabited power brokers?
Yes, I think so. Um, yeah, I'm not going to sit here and argue for the existence of the Illuminati because they've left a paper trail, however thin it may be, behind them. And as a historian, that's what you look for, is you look for the document trail. Um, and you know, like I pointed out with the letter that Washington wrote, this is in 1798. This is the early republic. That he knew that this stuff was going on, and that there were actually generations coming after him that were even more involved, more illuminized than the people that he knew about in country at the time. These were the crackpots that created the American pantheon.
Mm-hmm.
People like you know there's the painting, like the apotheosis of George
Right.
Washington.
Now, who
Washington
come
would
up with
have,
that?
well, that's what was his name? Not L'Enfant was the architect that laid Washington D.C. out. It's right on the tip of my tongue, Daniel.
Come on, get it out.
Yeah, I know. I should know this because I talked about it a couple of weeks. Anyway, it'll hit me at 3. It'll hit me at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right,
That's when I'll
right.
remember it. Um, but for the most part, particularly people like Washington would have scoffed at this kind of junk. He I mean, this guy stepped down after 2 terms as president voluntarily. I mean, he could have been king for life if he had wanted to, because there were people that wanted to make him that. But he's scoffing at all this. It's this generation of Illuminized, Freemasons, take your pick, whatever, secret society they were in, that did this, that created the American civil religion, if you will, that the pantheon of the founding fathers, and they're so godlike, and all of the sort of mystery religion, Greco-Roman pageantry that we see in our monuments, like the Washington Monument, and the the very layout of Washington
Who
D.C.
knew that the venerable George Washington name would be mired in the mud and run by a bunch of freaks, a big freak show in Washington D.C.
I
I don't
know.
think he'd want his name anywhere near that. So they should go.
No.
Those people in Washington D.C. should go away, found their own city called Kooksville, and get the hell
Yeah.
out of D.C. and let it return to the glory and that it should have. But you mentioned George Washington several times. Are you familiar with the angelic vision that he had, as reported in the Stars and Stripes in 1850?
Uh, yes, I am. In passing, I am. Um, you know, it's easy for a lot of researchers to sort of lump Washington in with um, Illuminized people, policymakers and politicians, and they were there. You could make a case for some of the founding fathers, like Hamilton, maybe Jefferson. Even though these guys were deists, I think that they God was using them either way.
Mm-hmm.
But in the case of Washington, Washington was only a master mason. That was a third degree. That's not even a high degree mason.
Oh.
We have record of Washington attending 4 lodge meetings. Why? Because he spent 2/3 of his life in the field dodging musket fire in the French and Indian War. He had a little bit of time to come back to his farm, just in time to pay off the debts that had been accrued, and then he gets appointed commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. Then he serves as the president. He didn't have any time to take part in some sort of Illuminati conspiracy. In fact, I'm convinced he fought against it, and I'm also convinced that he was a devout Christian. We have his prayer book as testimony of that. Some people criticize him because they say he didn't take communion every time he went to church. Well, Washington was just the kind of severe personality, not meant in a negative way, but he was just that kind of self-examining person, where he took the admonition of Paul very seriously. If he felt like there was something between him and God that wasn't right at the
Mm-hmm.
time, this was the character that would have driven Washington not to take communion. And so I see all these points historically as moot. So people may be able to make a case for some Illuminized founding fathers, Washington was not amongst them.
Mm. Well, that's good to know. Restore our faith in our, as they're trying to redo our history here. So when we're talking about the wheats and the tares, now,
Mm.
is it possible the wheats and the tares, the wheats is the unvaxxed and the tares are the vaxxed? I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, I mean, that's possible. I would hate to think that it would come down to a vaccination that would be the deciding factor there. And as far as tying it to the, like something like the mark of the beast, which is, that's been part of the narrative too, on the
Mm-hmm.
periphery, shall we say?
Yeah, it has.
Um, I think the
That'll
mark,
get you some clicks and
it'll
some
give you some
likes.
clicks. That's right. The mark of the beast has to be more than just a barcode on your hand or your head. It's got to be something. There's got to be this supernatural component, because it has eternal consequences.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just going to be material or technological. or
Mm-hmm.
or chemical in this case,
Mm-hmm.
medical. It's going to be something that goes beyond that. That may be part of the end game, the long game. Um,
Well, you see
but I
the evolution of the mark of the beast. Remember when they first came out with an RFID chip, for
yeah,
even for dogs, and said, "There it is,
right,
the mark." And can
right.
you imagine? Do you know how many Sunday morning sermons were preached on the RFID chip is the one that's going to that's the
Yeah,
mark of the beast? Well, that
a lot.
technology is so old now.
Yeah,
It's like, wait a minute. So now your cell phone is the mark of the beast, right?
yeah,
Or an
yeah.
injection is a mark of the beast. It's kind of like evolving, like almost like UFOs, the classic 1950 UFO going around.
Mm,
But now we got higher tech. Wait a minute, what happened to those?
yeah.
I'm just saying.
Well, and that's almost a cultural invariant. That the things that we tend to be most afraid of. And I don't think this is incidental because I'm looking at it through the biblical lens. But you can track this through cultures over space and time, basically. That the things that people are most superstitious and afraid of tend to have a direct correlation with the level of their technology,
Mm-hmm.
or their intellectual traditions.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was. Um, Now, the demonic, they know that too because they crafted it that way. They
Mm-hmm.
engineered it, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, to be that
Mm-hmm.
way because they engineer culture too.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whereas in the Middle Ages it might have been, wraiths or a vampire or something.
Mm-hmm.
Once we get into
Well.
our age, it's aliens that abduct you and do all kinds of atrocious things to you. But
Mhm.
they're all the same entity.
Yeah, but I bet Pete Buttigieg won't mind getting abducted and getting probed. But hey, thinking about that the cultural relevance, you can go back to Ezekiel's wheel, a wheel within a wheel. Well, he
Mhm.
couldn't say it was a saucer with anti gravity levitation and jet propulsion, and ran by lithium crystals. All he knew is it was a wheel spinning around, So that
Mhm.
is this the type of cultural description and relevance that what you have in your knowledge gives you that description of what it is.
Yeah, I mean, the ideation, the collective ideation of any culture is going to be reflective of that. Whatever their highest achievements in terms of material and intellectual culture are.
Hmm. All right, let's get some more questions here. Gladys says, Dr. Burton, have you seen the presentations of Klaus Dana, Ancient Unexplained Artifacts?
I have seen some of them. I think the last one that I watched of Klaus Dana was maybe 2018 or 2019, but I have seen some of them.
Well, if you guys speak, is that German?
I believe he
Klaus?
is German.
Klaus?
Klaus.
So it should be Klaus und ein und Reich und Dana.
That's it.
That's my German right there. You
That's
didn't.
good pronunciation.
Herr Klaus.
Sehr gut, mein Herr.
Well, my last name is Ott, and they come from
Yes.
the German lineage Otto von Udenhausen, Rask, Ro, and Rui.
Okay.
Or there's another one, Eden, Duden, Rocken, Rollin. That's some more German for you. All right, let's get some more questions for you. I heard that anyone who gets the jab can no longer donate blood. Is that something we want to talk about?
I'll have to plead ignorance on that. I don't know that. I don't know that a person can't donate blood if they get the Jabberwocky.
Jab. I call it infection by injection. So, man. Hey, let me get back to another question here for you.
All right.
If the whole world worships the dragon, who will be left to come up to Jerusalem to worship God by the iron rod Jesus will weld?
The newly converted, those people that are converted. The subtext of that passage is the revival, particularly amongst Jews, that takes place. So it's going to be. It won't be the people who have sided with the dragon.
I don't like the dragon.
Yeah, who does, right?
Yeah.
The filthy, stinking things that hoard gold.
I'll smack him in the damn mouth if I ever see him. All right, got another one here. Have you personally, this is from Put Y'all Wafers, have you personally seen any cryptids, ETs, UFOs, or demonic entities?
Yes. I did a little work in a deliverance ministry when I was in college, and so I've certainly seen demonic manifestations, and I've been witness to a number of interesting paranormal phenomena. There's one. There's a small town northeast of here called Anson, and it's got a phenomenon similar to the Marfa lights,
Oh.
called the Anson lights, that takes place that you can view. So yeah, the short answer to that is yes. I have seen
Hmm.
I have seen supernatural paranormal manifestations.
Well, I certainly have experienced some myself. So let me just throw this question out. People watching in the live chat, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, the chat's on the right. If you're watching off the website, the chat is up to the left upper top. They both are connected. Anybody in the live chat, have you seen a cryptid in the live chat? And we're talking Shadow Man, Hat Man, Catmandu, little people,
Dogman.
gargoyles, zombies. I mean, what else we got, Judd?
We got
Werewolves?
Dogman, ghouls, um, Goatman down here in Texas.
That goat man's
Any
got it.
Goatman sightings?
That goat man thing seems like a kind of an upgrade to the dog man.
I don't know if it's an up. It might be a side grade. I don't know if it's an upgrade.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, he's supposed
Side grade.
he's supposed he's supposed to be really really fearful, or really ominous, I should say, not
Mm-hmm.
fearful. Much the way that Pan was. We get the word panic from Pan,
Mm-hmm.
because he had a war cry that terrified his enemies.
Okay, so we got some results coming in the live chat. Let's see what we got there, Doctor Judd. We've got. I guess somebody said they saw Brown Mountain lights. I've just got a yes. This is the question of whether it's not somebody's seen a cryptid or monster type of thing. Man
Hmm.
says they've seen the Hat Man. Maybe they're looking at
Okay.
him right now. Don't know. And here, of course, Goat Man is almost like Pan. I think you mentioned that. I saw a top hat man, very large, dark, towering over the two demons. Wow, I don't know what
Hmm.
that person has seen. I don't want to face that down unless I'm armed. All right, let's get to another question here. What is your interpretation of Revelation 13:2? I don't know if you want to look that up or you got time or.
I think he's. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's a reference to the angels that are chained in the Euphrates.
Mm-hmm. We
Let
also
me
got
let me.
somebody saw a black triangle. We got another Hat Man sighting. Somebody wearing a fedora. Somebody saw a shadow man.
Yeah.
Now this person here says they saw a Batman. Now you know what? If it's any other show, I would argue with that, but not in this show here. Not in
Well,
this show here. Chupacabra.
I mean, if the signal was in the sky, I mean, there's a good
What are
chance
you
it
going
was
to do?
him.
If the signal's in the
What?
sky, you must quit. If
It's
the
his
bat cape
job.
if the cat
It's
bat
his
cape
job. He can't just say I'm tired, or I don't feel good. He's got to show up.
I don't know. I wonder if he gets paid overtime, say like late hours or something.
Uh,
I mean, the boy that's always wearing those tights. I didn't know what was up with that. Back in those days, Batman and Robin wearing tights was probably
yeah, it's not
okay, but
not qu- not quite like the
no,
okay, Revelation. It was 13:2, right?
yeah, 13 too.
Okay. To the beast. Okay, the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. Okay, yeah, the beast is supposed to be like um like the sort of the outward expression of the Antichrist. Um, obviously it's theriomorphic. That's why it uses the Greek word therion there, because it's a composite image of these different animals. Not unlike you find, um, you know, the angels aren't these fat little cherubs that are shooting arrows at each other that we see on the Valentine's cards.
Right.
Certainly, in they might look anthropomorphic when they come into our realm, but
Mm-hmm.
they don't in the heavenlies. They've got multiple sets of, they're different classes of angels, and they have some are
Mm-hmm.
have different faces, and they're animals,
Mm-hmm.
and some are big collections of eyes, and some have 6 pairs of wings. So uh, this is really because it's the beast, because it's the dragon here. It's a bastardization again of what Yahweh presents. God presents the good, the demonic turns it on its head and perverts it.
Well, I mean, even Joe Biden didn't believe in cherubs until he heard they were naked little fat babies, and then all of a sudden he's a believer.
Yeah,
But yeah, but if you look at the biblical description, they're not those little fat flying little naked babies. It just seems to me
yeah,
it's one of these Catholic things, man. With these guys walking around in these robes, they're naked under them robes. They're looking for
yeah,
little kids. They're
yeah.
making stuff up with the naked babies. Kind of sick. They're still seem to be in charge. I know everybody in Washington is a Catholic. I mean, is that why they like them little naked baby things? I don't know.
I would
Uh,
hope not. There certainly are a lot of good Catholics.
well, there are. You can't lump them all, and I certainly just
Yeah.
seem like I just did. But I
Well,
like to I like to
I
take
know
my
that you're not.
swipes.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there are a lot of. I think because it's convenient.
Hmm.
It doesn't necessarily speak to a genuine faith, but it makes a hell of a cover.
Cover. Yeah, there you go. Good point there. I mean, it seems to me some Catholic priests, to their credit, have either denied uh, Joe Bite Me communion or nasty Pelosi. I think one of those two have been denied communion because of their stance of killing babies. And so, to the Catholics' credit, they're out there.
Yeah, yeah.
They seem to be more adamant about pro-life than a lot of
Well,
Christian.
not not just pro-life, but here over the last 10 or 15 years, the Roman Catholic Church has been training more exorcists because of increased demonic activity.
Mhm.
But as far as the Protestant evangelical church in America, is asleep at the wheel by comparison.
Hmm. Now, speaking of being asleep at the wheel, I love to generalize attacks on the current church only because I think they need a good push. They need some iron sharpening iron.
Yeah,
There's
we love them. They're our brothers and
yeah,
sisters.
we
But
love them, man.
man,
But man, come
but
on, man. There's a war going on, and they're talking about how to lose weight for Jesus. I mean, come on. I mean, bikers for Jesus. Okay, I got that. Well, how about telling people about Jesus? How about that? I don't know. But anyway, I'll get off that. But are they preparing? Shouldn't they be preparing people for this end time scenario? At least have some general guidance. If some of the things
yeah,
we're talking about, so was the days of Noah. I don't even know how one would, because I'm not a biblical scholar, but I don't know how one would prepare for the days of Noah. But it sounds like some pretty nasty times, and it does seem there should be some preparation because even Noah was getting prepared. But is the church being
yes,
prepared?
yeah, and it's not just physical. It's not putting bags of rice and beans back for the stuff hitting the fan scenario, but it's all more than that. It's the spiritual preparation. It's those of us that are already starting to discern what you and I are talking about, and there are lots of us out there. um, we're the ones who are going to be there to minister to the people who can't wrap their heads around it, even when they're watching it unfold right in front of their eyes. Because we have yet to see just how bad this could potentially get. I hope it doesn't. I
Hmm.
hope that more people wake up, and that that God has grace and mercy on us again and blesses us. But there's no guarantee of that. You can't just kill millions of babies every year and expect God to turn a blind eye to that.
Hmm.
Not when Jesus is telling, woe to the person, that hurts one of these little ones. Is better that a millstone be hung around his neck and him thrown in the sea. Uh, you just you can't get away with that particular species of murder.
So how would you think one should be prepared?
Well, people should. I mean, if you're not now, people should be developing conversancy in the Bible, some level of biblical literacy, just so that about this stuff, and you should definitely be in a whether through your own study or you're being discipled in a Bible study or a class or something like that, you definitely need to be, deepening that relationship you have with Jesus Christ, because there are going to be a lot of scared and confused people, if this
Right.
stuff does
And really,
reach its.
and as we said earlier, and many of them are not. It's not because of who they are. It's because of the message they've been getting. Now, I don't know if you can see this. Somebody just sent this picture of, I guess what they're saying is some sort of monster that was
Uh-huh.
maybe in the snow. And so, let me see if I can find out exactly what this says here.
Is that a dollar bill?
That's yeah. It looks like it's for using for
Was
scale. So,
was this was the cryptid in question a stripper?
well, it must have been because evidently that appears to be a foot, not in a shoe. So, okay. So this person that sent it says, I sent a picture, and they used to hear screams like a woman and a lion roar in the woods, had
Hmm.
acres off the woods in the state park at Starved Rock, Illinois. So yeah, man, looks like there's some things out there creeping around,
Yeah,
Dr. Judd.
that sounds like some Sasquatch activity right there, because they're.
Should should we like when we go out be prepared to meet a monster? Should we have holy water, silver bullet,
No,
garlic?
not necessarily. I mean, those kinds of apotropaics were generally culturally specific. Um, it, in all of them, it's your best weapon is faith. I mean, look to the scriptures to where your best weapons against those kinds of entities are, because it's part of the reason that I started these programs through the institute, teaching these classes on. I have a Monsters 101. It's preternatural morphology, but it's
Hmm.
Monsters 101, looking at them through the Bible, where we talk about a lot of those kinds of things. How people dealt with these demonic entities and how the root of them is demonic. So yeah, I mean, people should always be prepared, because if we're to go by the example that Jesus set, half of his ministry was
Hmm.
dealing with the demonic.
Yeah. Well, I was getting ready to say I was searching for a word. It just came to me when I said when I mentioned the church kind of in a general term of not really helping the general population.
Hmm.
I said I was saying it was not going to be iron sharpening iron here. It's iron sharpening milk toast. That's the word I was looking
Yeah.
for. And
Yeah.
somebody and they're saying this is a juvenile Bigfoot here. There's
Okay.
hey, if you got big ones, you got juveniles, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, if that's a dollar bill, then yeah, that's got to be a baby.
Um, Let me get to got a few more questions here, and then we'll be pretty close to the end here. But it says, um, and now somebody's always putting names in there that's going to trip me up because I'm just a cowboy, so I can't pronounce these things. Can you please share your thoughts on Hattori Hanzo, aka the Demon Samurai Ninja, and Samael, aka the Left Hand of God? Or is that familiar to you?
Now, Samuel, I'm familiar with, and my only knowledge of Hattori Hanzo is that he was a famed sword maker,
Mm-hmm.
um, in the late, probably the late period of the samurai before they were disbanded. Um, I don't know anything about. I mean, and what I'm doing is I'm pleading ignorance. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I know about Hattori Hanzo, but that's the only thing I know about him. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know about any occult connections with Hattori Hanzo.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to look into that.
I know there's a creature out there called Double Gonzo. Is
Okay,
he related?
that I don't know.
Or that could be a Ted Nugent album. I don't know which.
Double Gonzo sounds like a Ted Nugent album.
uh, I like that guy too because I always assumed he did drugs. Man, he's one of the cleanest. He never did drugs. No, I don't think
He
his
was
whole band never did drugs.
clean the whole way through.
And you gotta like that.
Yep.
But if you see a double gonzo out there, I don't know what that takes. Holy water or maybe Oregon. I mean, I think Oregon would probably deal with them. Um, but no, people need information about what's happening in our culture and how to address it. And I'm just going to throw this question out. If people in the live chat, for those of you that go to church, have they had anything talking about whether or not you should get the infection by injection, otherwise known as COVID-19, Anybody say, have they taught? I'm asking anybody who goes to church, has any of that been brought up in your church from the pulpit? Now, I don't
Mm,
mean private groups because, private groups we get to gabbing, but I
mm.
mean from the pulpit. Has anybody heard anything from there? Okay, okay, Doctor Judd. So now, you're talking about your latest project and book? Let's talk more about that. What are you doing? What are you up to?
Well, as I pointed out a moment ago, a lot of what I'm doing is teaching these new programs that I've developed. I have 6 of them, and I'd say that there are 4 of them that are directly, or 3 that are directly relevant. The preternatural morphology, which is the Monsters 101, where we're looking at vampires and werewolves and witches and ghouls and things like that through the biblical lens, is a really popular one. Biblical demonology is probably a close second, which is pretty much how it sounds, looking at the demonic realm through the biblical lens.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got a new mythology program too that is a survey of world mythology, but again, looking at how it relates to the biblical world and the biblical narrative. So while I'm doing that, of course, I reference the Göbekli Tepe book that Aaron and I are finishing up right now, and I'm also finishing a book that I've been working on for quite some time called The Van Helsing Way, which is a
Wow.
which is a it's similar to the material that I'm teaching in the Monsters 101 class. It's looking at the folkloric creatures and vampires and werewolves and revenants and things like reanimants and things like that as demonic at their root and should be treated as such.
Wow. I think that's relevant knowledge because we've been talking about monsters the whole time, and monsters come in many
I
shapes and forms. Do they not,
Yeah,
Doctor Burton?
yeah, and on the cryptid side, like I said, there are more and more sightings of these things, and because we have the ability to post all kinds of evidence. Not that there's not hoaxing out there. There certainly is, but um, I mean, at the end of the day, quantitatively, you have to say that there are more sightings of cryptids and UFOs and all kinds of
Mm-hmm.
paranormal
Mm-hmm.
phenomena.
Well, like I would think so. I mean, because where it says, "So shall it be," when the Son of Man comes, as it was in the
Right,
days of Noah. But
right.
we mentioned all sorts of monsters and various things that existed pre-flood, and
Hmm.
so now when we are talking about these type of cryptids, are we talking about beings that you can physically see, or are we talking about in the supernatural realm where it's invisible and things are happening? Maybe they'll just kind of you know, materialize for a second and then dematerialize? Or are we talking about somebody that go outside my front yard and there's a dog man sitting right there and and then
Well,
I go over and
I
cold
think
cock him?
yeah, I think that there's room for both. I think that that the material and the preternatural don't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive. There are some times when these things will manifest out of their realm, and then there are some times when they manifest physically, and that shouldn't come as a big surprise because what are they using? They're using watcher tech. Okay, the the watchers were able to manipulate matter when they came into our realm. That knowledge was passed down to their progeny, uh, and the giants that would exist in the post flood world, and so that the ability to do that um, can be found in both of those abilities can be found in a number of creatures. But the thing to remember is, you know, you have to strip away the literary pop culture facade of a lot of these things and look at them at their demonic root. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that's really the key. And again, that's why I came up with these programs, because I don't think there's been a time in history when it's been more relevant and more obligatory, if I can say that, to
I couldn't say it.
have some knowledge of these things and be conversant in them so that you'll have some frame of reference, because there's no hiding it anymore.
Well, I'm just thinking that we need some answers, and it sounds to me like you got programs there that can help us get those answers. The
Yes,
Bible Didn't the Bible say, "Be prepared to answer every man that hope that is within you"?
yes, and it also says to prove yourself by study, so you can be approved by the Lord. Um, Certainly, I mean, implicit in that is biblical literacy, scriptural literacy, which has gone into the toilet along with, general literacy. We're graduating kids that haven't read an entire book in their life and don't ever intend to.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if people want to be revolutionary and fight the system, there's no better stance to take than that right there. Crack your Bible open, crack your books open, read for comprehension, for mastery, like your life depended on it.
Well, I think
Because
that.
there are people that want to destroy knowledge. They're already in the process of amending and changing the narrative.
Well, it seems to me that history is going to be changing real soon.
Yeah.
So we're not going to be able to know what the true history is. So we have to arm ourselves with information. That's right. Study to show thyself approved. Dr. Judd Burton, man, every time you're on the show, I always have such a good time. I love talking to you. You always bring so much to us. I appreciate you coming on. Any final thoughts? The floor is yours.
No. Well, I appreciate that, Dino. I always have a good time too. You're a good guy. Yeah, I would just encourage people, if people are interested in studying with me, they can do that. I've got a sale right now. Usually these programs are anywhere between $150 and $200, but I've got them on sale right now for $101 each. So 101, like an introduction. And if people, depending on when people watch this, even if they watch it after the sale is done, if they'll put Edge in the subject line and email me at professorburton@yahoo.com, I'll still give them the 101 discount, even if the price has gone up. So people can do that, and they can certainly follow me at burtonbeyond.com and tioba.com or .org, excuse me. And I'm on social media, so all of those places. But my parting advice would be to, gird your loins, as it were, because information is going to be, information and spiritual preparedness are going to be the two helms that are going to assist us the most.
Spiritual preparedness sounds like it'd be more of a weapon than a silver bullet.
Yes, well, I mean, it is sharper than a two-edged sword.
And that sounds pretty sharp. All right, Dr. Burton, I appreciate you coming on. Can we have you on again sometime?
Anytime.
Okay.
Anytime.
All right, man. I appreciate you coming on the show.
You bet, Daniel. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.